I never thought my own family would betray me, but life has a way of revealing painful truths at the most unexpected moments. I discovered mine on a warm spring afternoon, just 3 months before I was supposed to start college. Sarah, we need to talk. My mother's voice carried an unusual edge as she called me into the living room. I found both my parents sitting stiffly on the couch, their expressions unreadable. My sister Madison wasn't there, probably out shopping for her upcoming wedding, as usual. I settled into the armchair across from them, my stomach already knotting with anxiety. Something felt off. "It's about your college fund," my father began, not quite meeting my highs. "There's been a change of plans." My heart skipped a beat. The college fund, my future, my dreams of attending Northwestern University where I'd already been accepted. 4 years of perfect grades, countless sleepless nights studying, and endless extracurricular activities had finally paid off when that acceptance letter arrived. "What do you mean, change of plans?" My voice came out smaller than I intended. My mother cleared her throat, her perfectly manicured hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Well, with Madison's wedding coming up and all the unexpected expenses," she trailed off, looking to my father for support. "We had to make a difficult decision," he continued, still avoiding my gaze. "The wedding venue Madison wants, it's more expensive than we anticipated. And then there's the designer dress she has her heart set on, the catering, the flowers." The room started spinning slightly as realization dawned. "Are you saying you used my college fund for Madison's wedding?" The silence that followed was deafening. "We didn't have a choice, sweetie," my mother finally said, her voice taking on that familiar patronizing tone she used when trying to justify something unconscionable. "Madison's wedding is a once-in-a-lifetime event. She deserves to have her dream day." "And what about my dreams?" I whispered, my hands beginning to shake. "What about Northwestern?" My father shifted uncomfortably. "You can take out student loans like most other kids, or maybe consider community college for a couple of years. Madison needs this money now. She's marrying into the Reynolds family. Everything has to be perfect." Ah yes, the Reynolds family. Ever since Madison had gotten engaged to Thomas Reynolds, whose father owned one of the largest real estate development companies in the state, my parents had been obsessed with appearances. Nothing was too expensive when it came to impressing their future in-laws. "You can't do this," I protested, my voice growing stronger with anger. "That money was for my education. You promised." "Don't be selfish, Sarah," my mother cut in sharply. "Your sister deserves this. She's marrying into an important family. This wedding could change all our lives for the better. You're young, you have time to figure things out." I sat there, stunned by the casual way they had just demolished my future plans. The college fund had been building since I was a baby. Regular deposits, birthday money from relatives, even my own contributions from summer jobs. All of it gone. Sacrifice for Madison's perfect day. "How much?" I managed to ask. "How much of my fund did you take?" My parents exchanged glances. $127,000, my father finally admitted. The number hit me like a physical blow. $127,000, nearly every penny I had for college. Gone. "Does Madison know?" I asked, already suspecting the answer. "We didn't want to worry her," my mother replied quickly. "She's under enough stress planning the wedding. There's no need to burden her with this detail." Of course not. Madison had always been sheltered from any unpleasantness. The golden child, the perfect daughter who could do no wrong. While I worked part-time jobs throughout high school, she focused on her social life. While I studied late into the night maintaining my 4.0 GPA, she barely scraped by with C's and D's. But none of that mattered because Madison was beautiful, charming, and now marrying into money. I stood up, my legs feeling oddly numb. "I need some air." "Sarah, try to understand," my father called after me. "Family has to come first sometimes." I paused at the door, turning back to look at them. Family? Is that what this is? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like sacrifice only goes one way in this family. I walked out of the house that afternoon with a strange sense of clarity. The parents who had always preached about the importance of education, who had encouraged my academic achievements and praised my responsible nature, they had just shown me exactly how little any of that actually meant to them. In my room that night, I pulled out my Northwestern acceptance letter, running my fingers over the embossed logo. The words that had once filled me with such joy now felt like a cruel joke. 4 years of tuition at Northwestern would cost over $200,000. Even with scholarships, without my college fund, it was impossible. My phone buzzed. A text from Madison. OMG sis, wait till you see the wedding cake I picked. It's only $3,000 but so worth it. I stared at the message, a hollow laugh escaping my throat. $3,000 for a cake that would be eaten in one day. Meanwhile, my entire future had been derailed. The next morning, I walked into Riverside Community Bank, where I'd opened my first savings account at age 16. Mrs. Chen, the branch manager who had known me for years, smiled warmly as I approached her desk. "Sarah, what brings you in today?" I took a deep breath. I need to know something. My college fund, were my parents the only ones with access to it? Mrs. Chen's smile faded slightly. "Let me check that for you." She typed something into her computer, then frowned. "According to our records, you were added as a joint account holder on your 18th birthday, as per standard procedure. Didn't your parents tell you?" My heart stopped. I had been a joint account holder for the past 6 months, which meant they needed your signature to withdraw the funds. Mrs. Chen continued, looking increasingly concerned. "Sarah, is everything okay?" With trembling hands, I pulled out my phone and showed her the last bank statement I had received. "Can you tell me exactly how this money was withdrawn?" What Mrs. Chen revealed over the next hour changed everything. The money hadn't been withdrawn in one lump sum. Instead, there had been a series of transfers over the past 3 months, all authorized using what appeared to be my signature. "Would you like to see the transfer authorization forms?" Mrs. Chen asked quietly. I nodded, and she pulled up scanned copies on her computer. There, at the bottom of each form, was my signature, or rather a close approximation of it. "That's not my signature," I whispered. Mrs. Chen's expression turned grave. "Sarah, if you're saying these signatures were forged—" They were. I never authorized any of these transfers. My voice was steady now, anger replacing shock. "I want copies of all these documents, please." As Mrs. Chen printed out the forms, I made a decision. My parents hadn't just stolen my college fund. They had committed fraud. They had forged my signature, probably assuming I would never check or wouldn't dare to challenge them if I did. They were wrong. I left the bank that day with a thick folder of documents and a plan forming in my mind. If my parents thought they could simply sacrifice my future for Madison's perfect wedding, they were about to learn a very expensive lesson. The next few weeks passed in a blur of careful preparation. I made no mention of my discovery to my parents, instead playing the role of the dutiful daughter who had accepted their decision. I attended Madison's endless wedding planning sessions, nodding and smiling as she gushed about her $15,000 designer dress and the imported flowers that cost more than a semester's worth of textbooks. Meanwhile, I was busy. I opened a new bank account at a different bank, one my parents knew nothing about. I took the evidence of their fraud to a lawyer, Mr. Harrison, my debate team coach's husband, who reviewed everything pro bono and confirmed what I already knew: what they had done was illegal. "You have a solid case, Sarah," he told me gravely. "But are you sure you want to pursue this, taking legal action against your own parents?" "They forged my signature to steal my future," I replied calmly. "I'm just making sure they understand there are consequences." 2 days before Madison's wedding, I made my move. I waited until after the rehearsal dinner, when everyone was home and my sister was busy trying on her dress one last time. I found my parents in the kitchen, discussing last-minute reception details. "We need to talk," I said, placing the folder of bank documents on the counter between us. My mother barely glanced up from her wedding planner. "Can it wait, sweetie? We're finalizing the seating arrangements." "No, it can't wait." I opened the folder and spread out the transfer authorization forms. "I think you should explain these." The color drained from my father's face as he recognized the documents. My mother's perfectly plucked eyebrows drew together in confusion, then shock as she realized what she was looking at. "Where did you get these?" my father demanded, his voice hoarse. "From the bank. Turns out I've been a joint account holder since I turned 18, which means," I continued, watching their expressions carefully, "that you needed my signature to transfer any money out of that account. My real signature, not these forgeries." "Sarah," my mother began, her voice trembling slightly, "you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I cut her off. I understand that you committed fraud. I understand that you forged my signature multiple times to steal my college fund. And I understand that what you did is a felony. My father's face had turned an interesting shade of gray. You wouldn't. Wouldn't what? Report it? Press charges? Why not? You clearly weren't worried about my future when you stole my money. Why should I worry about yours? We're your parents, my mother hissed, glancing nervously toward the stairs where Madison was still admiring herself in her wedding dress. You can't do this to us. I gathered up the documents, tucking them carefully back into the folder. Actually, I can, but I'm giving you a choice. You have 24 hours to transfer my money back into my account, all of it. If you don't, these documents go to the police. But the wedding. My father protested weakly. Everything's paid for. We can't just. Not my problem, I replied coldly. Maybe you should have thought about that before you committed fraud. 24 hours. I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and if you're wondering how to explain this to Madison or the Reynolds family, don't worry, I'm sure you'll think of something. After all, you're pretty good at making things up. With that, I walked out, leaving them staring at each other in horrified silence. As I climbed the stairs to my room, I heard Madison's excited voice floating down the hallway. This wedding is going to be absolutely perfect. I smiled grimly. Perfect wasn't quite the word I would use. That night, I barely slept, waiting for my parents' next move. Would they call my bluff? Try to talk their way out of it? Or would they finally face the consequences of their actions? The answer came at 6:47 the next morning when my phone buzzed with a bank alert. Deposit received. $127,000. They had done it. They had somehow found the money to return my college fund. I lay in bed, staring at the notification, feeling not triumph but a deep, aching sadness. My parents had been willing to commit fraud to give my sister her dream wedding, and only the threat of legal consequences had made them do the right thing. Later that morning, I found them sitting shell-shocked at the kitchen table. My mother's eyes were red from crying, and my father looked like he had aged 10 years overnight. The money's back in my account, I said quietly. My father nodded without looking up. We had to take out a second mortgage on the house, he mumbled, and cash in our retirement accounts. I see. I kept my voice neutral. So when it was my future at stake, using my money was fine. But when it's your future on the line, suddenly you find a way to make things work. Sarah, please, my mother pleaded. You have to understand. We were just trying to give your sister. Save it? I cut her off. I understand perfectly. I understand that in this family, I will always come second to Madison. I understand that my dreams, my future, mean nothing compared to her happiness. And I understand that you were willing to commit a crime to make her happy. I pulled out an envelope and placed it on the table. This is my withdrawal from the wedding party. I won't be attending. You can't. My mother gasped. What will people say? I laughed bitterly. That's still all you care about, isn't it? What people will say? Well, here's something to think about. What would people say if they knew you forged your daughter's signature to steal her college fund? My father finally looked up, his face ashen. You wouldn't. No, I won't, I agreed. As long as you never try anything like this again. The documents are in a safe place. If any money ever goes missing from my accounts again, they go straight to the police. I turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. Owen, when Madison asks why I'm not at her wedding, feel free to tell her the truth. I'm sure she'd be very interested to know how her perfect day was almost funded by fraud. I walked out of that house and never looked back. I missed Madison's wedding, ignored the flood of angry texts from relatives, and focused on my future. The money was back in my account, but something else was gone forever, my trust in my family. I did end up going to Northwestern, graduated with honors, and built a successful career. My parents occasionally reached out, trying to mend fences, but I kept them at arm's length. Madison's perfect wedding ended in divorce 3 years later, but by then I was too focused on my own life to care. Some people say blood is thicker than water, that family should always come first. But they never mention what happens when your family sees you as nothing more than a bank account to be drained for someone else's benefit. Sometimes the hardest lesson is learning that the people who should protect you are the ones you need protection from. Little did I know, this was just the beginning. 10 years later, my parents would come crawling back, desperate for help with a life-saving surgery. But by then, I had built something they never expected, And the tables had turned in ways they could never have imagined. 10 years can change everything. I stood at the window of my corner office on the 47th floor, watching the Chicago skyline shimmer in the late afternoon sun. The view still took my breath away, even after 3 years of working here. Sometimes I could hardly believe how far I'd come from that devastated 18-year-old whose parents had tried to steal her future. "Ms. Walker?" My assistant Rachel's voice came through the intercom. "Your 4 p.m. is here." I straightened my Armani blazer, a small smile playing at my lips. As Chief Investment Officer of Meridian Capital, I had come a long way from the girl who once worried about affording college. "Send them in." The door opened, and a middle-aged couple entered, both wearing expensive clothes that couldn't quite hide their nervous energy. New clients, recommended by one of our biggest accounts. They were here to discuss their portfolio. But I could see in their eyes what they really wanted: reassurance that their money was safe with the youngest CIO in Meridian's history. I had gotten used to that look over the years. At 28, I was often underestimated. But those who doubted me usually changed their minds quickly when they saw my track record. "Mr. and Mrs. Peterson, please have a seat." I gestured to the leather chairs facing my desk. "I've reviewed your portfolio, and I have some thoughts on how we can optimize your investment strategy." An hour later, they left with confident smiles and a solid plan for their 8-figure investment. Another successful meeting. I was about to call it a day when Rachel buzzed again. "Ms. Walker? There's someone here to see you. They don't have an appointment, but they're quite insistent." Something in her tone made me pause. "Who is it?" A moment of hesitation. "They say they're your parents." The world seemed to tilt slightly on its axis. My parents? Here. After 10 years of minimal contact, just occasional holiday cards and unanswered voicemails, they had shown up at my office. I took a deep breath. "Send them in." They looked older than I remembered. My father's hair had gone completely gray, and my mother's carefully maintained appearance couldn't hide the new lines around her eyes. They stood awkwardly just inside the door, taking in the expansive office with its floor-to-ceiling windows and expensive artwork. "Sarah," my mother breathed, her eyes wide. This is quite something." I remained seated behind my desk, my expression neutral. "What are you doing here?" They exchanged glances before my father stepped forward. "We need your help, Sarah. It's serious." Of course it was. They wouldn't be here otherwise. "Sit down," I said, gesturing to the chairs the Petersons had just vacated. "Tell me what's so urgent that you tracked me down at my office." They sat, my mother clutching her designer handbag like a shield. "It's your father," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "He needs surgery. Heart surgery. It's complicated, expensive, and insurance won't cover all of it." I leaned back in my chair, studying them. "How much?" $300,000, my father said quietly. "The procedure itself, plus recovery and rehabilitation. And you came to me." My voice was flat. "What about Madison? Surely your perfect daughter could help." My mother flinched at the bitterness in my tone. "Madison, she's not in a position to help right now. After the divorce, and then the failed business venture." Yes, Madison's spectacular fall from grace. After her marriage to Thomas Reynolds ended, she had tried to reinvent herself as a social media influencer, then a lifestyle coach, then a cryptocurrency expert. Each venture had failed more spectacularly than the last. Last I heard, she was living in a small apartment paid for by our parents. "So I'm your last resort," I said, a cold smile playing at my lips. "How things change." "Sarah, please," my father pleaded, his face ashen. "I know we hurt you. What we did with your college fund, it was wrong. We've regretted it every day since." "Have you?" I stood up, walking to the window. "Or do you just regret that I caught you? That I forced you to face the consequences of your actions?" "We were different people then," my mother interjected. "We were foolish, caught up in appearances and what other people would think. But this is life and death, Sarah." I turned back to face them. "Life and death," I repeated softly. Like my future was life and death to me? Like my dreams, my education, my chances for success. All of that was life and death to me. But you were willing to steal it away for Madison's perfect wedding. "We know we can't change the past," my father said, his voice weak. "But please, Sarah, I'm your father." I walked to my desk, pressed a button on my phone. "Rachel." Could you bring in the file from my personal safe, the one marked family history? A moment later, Rachel entered with a thick manila envelope. I thanked her, waited until she had left, then opened the envelope and spread its contents across my desk. Do you recognize these? I asked, watching their faces carefully. My mother gasped. The color drained from my father's face. There, laid out before them, were the bank documents from 10 years ago. The forged signatures, the fraudulent transfers, all of it. You kept them, my mother whispered. Of course I did. I picked up one of the forms, examining it with clinical detachment. I've often wondered, who actually forged my signature? Was it you, Dad? You were always good with details. Or was it Mom, with her steady hand from all those years of calligraphy lessons? Neither of them spoke. I kept these as a reminder, I continued. A reminder that the people who should have protected me were willing to commit a crime to take what was mine. And now you're here, asking me for help. Sarah, my father began, but I held up a hand to stop him. I'm not finished. You see, I did more than just keep these documents. I had them authenticated by forensic experts. I have sworn statements from bank employees about the fraudulent transfers. I have everything I would need to press charges, even now. You wouldn't, my mother breathed. After all this time, wouldn't I? I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. The statute of limitations for fraud in Illinois is 5 years from the discovery of the crime. But since I never officially reported it, that clock hasn't started ticking yet. I let that sink in for a moment before continuing. So here's what's going to happen. I'll pay for the surgery. Relief flooded their faces, but I wasn't done. But there are conditions. First, you're going to sign a detailed confession admitting to what you did 10 years ago. It will be notarized and kept with these documents. If you ever try to contact me for money again, if you ever try to manipulate or guilt me about anything, it all goes to the police. You really do that to your own parents? My mother asked, her voice barely a whisper. You did worse to your own daughter, I replied coldly. Second condition, you're going to tell Madison everything. The truth about how you almost funded her wedding, how you forged my signature, all of it. No more protecting her from reality. But it would destroy her, my mother protested. Like you almost destroyed my future. She's 32 years old. It's time she learned that actions have consequences. I sat back down at my desk. Those are my terms. Take them or leave them. They looked at each other, decades of marriage allowing them to communicate without words. Finally, my father nodded slowly. We'll do it, he said quietly. Whatever you want. I pressed the intercom. Rachel, please call Mr. Harrison and ask him to come up with the paperwork we discussed. While we waited, I studied my parents, really looked at them for the first time in years. They seemed smaller somehow, diminished. The power they once held over me, the ability to hurt me, had evaporated like morning dew in the harsh light of reality. Mr. Harrison arrived with the documents, a detailed confession I had prepared in advance, just in case this day ever came. I watched as my parents read through it, their hands shaking slightly as they signed, and had it notarized. The hospital will receive direct payment from my office, I told them as they stood to leave. You'll never see or handle the money. And remember, one request for more help, one attempt to manipulate me, and these documents go straight to the district attorney. You've become so hard, my mother said softly, tears in her eyes. No, I corrected her. I've become strong. There's a difference. You taught me that lesson, even if you didn't mean to. After they left, I stood at my window again, watching the sun set over Chicago. The city lights were coming on, thousands of tiny stars in the growing darkness. My phone buzzed. A text from Madison. How dare you make Mom and Dad tell me about what happened? I deserved that perfect wedding. You're just jealous because you'll never have what I had. I laughed softly, looking around my corner office, thinking about my penthouse apartment, my vacation home in Aspen, my investment portfolio worth more than that wedding 10 times over. You're right, Madison, I texted back. I'll never have what you had. I have something better. I have what I earned. Then I blocked her number, just like I had blocked my parents' numbers after their last desperate attempt to control me a decade ago. That night, I went home to my penthouse apartment and poured myself a glass of wine. A $500 bottle from my private collection. I walked out onto my balcony, looking out over the city I had conquered. 10 years ago, my parents had tried to steal my future to give my sister her perfect day. They had forged my signature, betrayed my trust, and dismissed my dreams as less important than Madison's happiness. But they had taught me valuable lessons about self-reliance, about the true nature of family, about the importance of protecting yourself even from those who should protect you. Those lessons had driven me to succeed beyond their wildest imaginations. Now they needed me, and I had helped them. But on my terms. No more manipulation, no more guilt, no more putting Madison's wants above my needs. I had taken back my power, and I would never let it go again. The next morning, I received a brief email from a hospital confirming that my father's surgery had been scheduled. I archived it without responding. Let them worry about whether I would follow through. Let them feel a fraction of the uncertainty they had forced on me all those years ago. I had won, but not in the way they feared. My victory wasn't in holding their fate in my hands, or in forcing them to face their past sins. My victory was in becoming someone they couldn't hurt anymore. Someone who had built her own success on her own terms. The scared 18-year-old girl who had discovered her parents' betrayal was gone. In her place stood a woman who had turned their greatest betrayal into her strongest motivation. They had tried to steal my future, but instead, they had pushed me to create one beyond their wildest dreams. As I walked into my office that morning, Rachel handed me my schedule for the day. Your 9 o'clock is here. Another potential client. They seem nervous about trusting their money to someone so young. I smiled, straightening my jacket. Don't worry, I'm very good at exceeding people's expectations. After all, I had learned from the best teachers, even if that wasn't what they had intended to teach me. The sun streamed through my office windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Another day, another chance to prove that sometimes the best revenge isn't in making others suffer, but in succeeding so spectacularly that their attempts to hold you back become nothing more than a footnote in your story of triumph. My parents had taught me that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about who believes in you, who supports your dreams, who wants to see you succeed. They had failed that test, but in doing so, they had forced me to believe in myself. And that, in the end, was worth more than any amount of money they could have stolen or any perfect wedding they could have funded. I picked up my phone and dialed, Rachel. Schedule a meeting with the hospital's financial department. I want to make sure everything's in order for the surgery, because in the end, I had chosen to help them not out of obligation or guilt, but because I could, because I had built something they could never take away from me, not just success, but strength. The strength to help without being manipulated, to give without being diminished, to succeed without their approval. That was the real victory, and it was worth every painful step along the way.